Only one circle remained untouched by the drought, and he wept when he discovered why. Walter Harrison was overcome with disbelief as he surveyed the devastation that had taken over the family property. After 15 years living in the capital, he had returned to the countryside of Kentucky with his wife Dorothy, expecting to find only ruins of the farm where he had grown up. It was then that his eyes fixed on that perfect circle of green grass in the middle of the parched land. Beside him, Dorothy covered her mouth with her hands, as surprised as her husband. "Walter, how is this possible?" she whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from that impossible sight. He shook his head, perplexed. All the vegetation around had been consumed by the worst drought in 50 years, but there, right in the center of what used to be the main house's backyard, grew a perfect circle of lush green grass, as if watered daily. "It doesn't make sense, Dorothy." "It hasn't rained here in over 8 months, murmured Walter, slowly approaching that anomaly of nature. The 72-year-old man, wearing his green shirt, faded by time, knelt at the edge of the circle and touched the grass with trembling hands. The soil was damp, almost soaked, contrasting with the arid ground that stretched for miles in every direction. Dorothy, 68, approached, carrying her worn black purse, and watched her husband with that expression he knew well after 43 years of marriage. It was her look when she felt something important was about to be revealed. "There's something strange about this place," she said, adjusting her beige sweater that she insisted on wearing even in the heat of the Kentucky backcountry. "I can feel it." Walter stood up, wiping his hands on his khaki pants. He was a practical man who always sought logical explanations for everything. During his years as an accountant in the capital, he had learned that numbers don't lie, and that there was always a reason behind every mystery. "There must be a broken pipe around here somewhere," he grumbled, more to himself than to his wife, "or a spring no one knew about." But even as he spoke, something inside him doubted that explanation. That circle was too perfect, too precise. It seemed to have been drawn by someone who knew exactly where to place each seed. The two stood there for long minutes, contemplating that small green island in the middle of the brown desolation that spread across the Harrison family property. The midday sun beat down on their heads, but neither of them moved. "Let's go inside," Dorothy finally said, picking up her black leather suitcase. "It's too hot out here." Walter nodded and picked up the brown leather suitcase he had brought from the city. They were 2 old suitcases that contained everything they had considered essential for this return to the countryside. The rest of their belongings had been left in the rented apartment in Louisville, waiting to see if they could really adapt to rural life again. The farmhouse was exactly as Walter remembered, only much older and more worn. The exposed brick walls were still solid, but the paint had peeled in several places. The wooden windows creaked as he opened them to air out the space that had been closed up for months. "At least the structure is sound," Dorothy commented, testing the sturdiness of one of the kitchen chairs. "It just needs cleaning and some repairs." Walter walked to the window overlooking the backyard and stared again at the green circle. Even from a distance, it seemed to glow under the scorching sun, as if made of a different material than the rest of the landscape. "Dorothy, come see this." She approached and stood beside her husband, following his gaze. The circle seemed even more impressive from above, from the perspective of the kitchen window. "It looks like it was drawn with a ruler and compass," she observed. "Too precise to be natural." Walter agreed silently. Throughout his career as an accountant, he had developed a sharp eye for patterns and precision. That was definitely not the work of chance. "Tomorrow I'll talk to Mr. Vernon," said Walter, referring to the nearest neighbor, whose property was about 5 kilometers away. "He must know something about this." Dorothy nodded, but continued to observe the circle with a thoughtful expression. There was something about that sight that stirred her in a way she couldn't explain. It was as if she was seeing a symbol, a sign of something important she didn't yet understand. "Walter, do you remember when the children were little and played here in the backyard?" He turned to look at his wife, surprised by the question. It was rare for her to mention the children spontaneously. Since they had moved to the city, they had gradually drifted apart from their 3 children, each living their own lives. "Yes, I remember. Why do you ask?" "I was just thinking..." Claire always played right in that spot where the circle is now. Remember how she liked to make little gardens in the dirt? Walter felt a pang in his chest, hearing the name of his youngest daughter. Claire had always been the most sensitive of the three children, the one who missed them the most when they moved to the city. But he had been so busy setting up the accounting office, so focused on ensuring the family's financial stability, that he barely had time for phone calls. "How long has it been since you spoke with her?" asked Dorothy, as if reading his thoughts. Walter hesitated. He didn't want to admit it had been over 6 months since his last conversation with Claire. She had called a few times, but he was always busy with clients or with the accounting books he brought home. "A few weeks," he lied, looking back out the window. Dorothy said nothing, but he knew she hadn't believed him. He knew that silence from his wife, laden with quiet disapproval. The rest of the day passed with organizing the house and making a list of necessary repairs. It was enough work to keep them busy for weeks, maybe months. But whenever they passed the kitchen window, they both stopped to observe the green circle. That night, while eating a simple dinner of bread and cheese they had brought from the city, Dorothy returned to the subject. "Walter, don't you think it's strange that exactly this patch of land survived the drought?" He chewed slowly before answering. He had spent the entire afternoon trying to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. "There must be some underground water source," he said finally. "Or else someone is coming here to water it." "But who would do that? The property has been abandoned for years." Walter had no answer to that question. The farm was isolated, far from the main road. It made no sense for someone to go to the trouble of coming all the way out there just to water a patch of grass. "Tomorrow I'll investigate further," he said, trying to end the discussion. But during the night he could hardly sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling of the old house, listening to the strange noises that always haunt old buildings. And whenever he closed his eyes, he saw that perfect circle of green grass. Dorothy was also restless. He heard her moving in bed, sighing softly. After 43 years together, he knew when she was worried about something. "What are you thinking about?" he whispered into the darkness. "About Claire," she answered without hesitation. "I have a bad feeling, Walter." He turned in bed to look at his wife's silhouette in the dark. Dorothy had always had these strange intuitions, especially when it came to the children. For years he had dismissed these premonitions as superstition, but time had taught him that she was rarely wrong. "Why don't you call her tomorrow?" he suggested. "I already tried. The phone has been out of service for weeks." Walter felt a chill down his spine. Claire had always been very careful to keep the phone working, especially because of her work as a nurse. If it was out of service, something had happened. "Maybe she moved," he said, trying to sound casual. "Without telling us, that's not like Claire." She was right. Claire had always been the most responsible daughter, the one who never forgot to call on her parents' birthdays or on important holidays. Her prolonged silence was truly worrying. "After we sort out the situation here, we'll go look for her," promised Walter. Dorothy didn't reply, but he felt her relax a little beside him. Eventually the two managed to sleep, but it was a restless sleep, full of strange dreams about green circles and missing daughters. The next morning, Walter woke up determined to solve the mystery of the circle. After a simple coffee, he left the house with a small hoe he had found in the back shed. Dorothy followed him, curious to see what he would discover. The morning sun was already strong, but the circle of grass seemed even greener and lusher than the day before. "I'll dig a little to see if there's a pipe underneath," said Walter, kneeling at the edge of the circle. But as soon as he started digging, he noticed something strange. The earth wasn't just damp, it was practically muddy, and there was a sweet smell in the air, like wildflowers. "What is that smell?" asked Dorothy, moving closer. Walter stopped digging and smelled the earth on his hands. It was a familiar scent, but he couldn't quite identify what it was. He kept digging deeper until the hoe hit something hard. "There's something down here." He dug around the object until he could pull it from the earth. It was a rusty metal can, the kind used for preserves. Inside it, protected by plastic, were several small packages. "What is this?" asked Dorothy, leaning in for a better look. Walter carefully opened one of the packages. It was a seed, but not just any seed. It was a special seed, the kind used for ornamental lawns, expensive and hard to find. Imported grass seeds, he murmured, examining the contents of the other packages. They must have cost a fortune. There were also small envelopes with special fertilizer, and even some handwritten instructions on how to plant and care for the grass. The handwriting was familiar, but he couldn't place whose it was. "Someone buried this here on purpose," said Dorothy, picking up one of the fertilizer envelopes. "Someone who knew exactly how to make the grass grow, even during the drought." Walter kept digging at different points in the circle and found more buried cans. All contained gardening supplies, seeds, fertilizers, small tools, and even a detailed schedule of when to apply each product. "This was planned," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Someone came here regularly for months, maybe years, to keep this circle alive." Dorothy picked up one of the papers with instructions and examined it more closely. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, with well-formed letters that suggested education and care. "Walter, I know this handwriting." He stopped digging immediately and looked at his wife. Her tone of voice had changed, now laden with an emotion he couldn't identify. "Whose is it?" Dorothy didn't answer immediately. She stared at the paper for long seconds, as if trying to be sure of what she saw. "It's Claire's," she finally whispered. The hoe slipped from Walter's hands. He felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Claire had been there. His youngest daughter had spent money and time to create that green oasis in the middle of the family's abandoned property. "Are you sure?" he asked, even though he knew Dorothy was never mistaken about these things. She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "It's her handwriting, yes. I recognize it from all the little letters she used to write when she was small." Walter took the paper from his wife's hands and studied it carefully. As he looked at the detailed instructions for lawn care, an old memory began to form in his mind. Claire had always been fascinated by plants and gardening, even as a child. She used to spend hours tending to the little flower beds she made in the farm's backyard. "But why?" he murmured. "Why would she do this?" Dorothy wiped her tears with her sweater sleeve. "Don't you understand, Walter? She was keeping a piece of the farm alive for us, for when we returned." His wife's words hit him like a revelation. During all those years in the city, thinking they had left the past behind, Claire had kept alive the hope that they would return, and she had done it the only way she knew how, by caring for the land with the same love they had neglected. "We need to find her," said Walter, feeling for the first time in years a real urgency regarding their children. Dorothy agreed with a nod. "But first, let's keep looking. Maybe there are more things buried here." The two spent the rest of the morning carefully digging around the circle. With each new discovery, the mystery deepened and their emotion grew. They found a small notebook protected by plastic, full of notes about the weather, fertilizer application dates, and even drawings of how she imagined the circle would look when it grew. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out, now continuing. Claire's handwriting filled every page with the meticulous care of someone documenting something very important. There were even calculations about the exact amount of water needed to keep the grass green during the dry months. "Look at this, Walter," said Dorothy, pointing to an entry in the notebook dated 6 months ago. She wrote, "Dad always said the farm's soil was the most fertile in the whole region. I'm going to prove he was right." Walter felt his voice catch as he read his daughter's words. During all those years focused on business in the city, he had completely forgotten those conversations with Claire about the quality of the farm's soil. To him, they had been just casual remarks, but to her they had been precious lessons she carried into adulthood. "There's more," Dorothy continued, turning the pages. "Today I got a promotion at the hospital. With the extra money, I'll be able to buy those special fertilizers I researched. The circle will be even more beautiful when Mum and Dad come back." Each diary entry revealed a level of dedication and hope that left the two increasingly moved, and at the same time, guilty. Claire had invested not only time and effort, but also a significant part of her salary to maintain that project. "She was spending her own money on this," murmured Walter, mentally calculating the cost of all the supplies they had found. Dorothy kept reading the notes, and her expression grew more and more concerned. "Walter, look at this entry from 2 months ago." She showed a page where Claire's handwriting seemed more rushed, less careful than usual. "I couldn't come last week because I was very weak after the chemotherapy, but I can't let the circle dry up. It's the only thing keeping alive my hope that the family will reunite again." The world seemed to stop around Walter. Chemotherapy. His daughter was sick, possibly very sick, and he didn't even know. For months, perhaps years, she had faced alone a battle against some serious illness. "How did we not know about this?" he asked, more to himself than to Dorothy. His wife shook her head, also shocked by the revelation. "She didn't want to worry us. You know how Claire is, always trying to protect everyone." Walter sat down heavily on the green grass his daughter had cultivated with so much love. For the first time in decades, he felt completely lost. All those years focused on building financial security for the family, and he had completely lost the connection with the people he loved most. "We have to find her now," he said, standing up with determination, "no matter where she is." Dorothy agreed, but before they left the circle she took one of the seeds they had found and planted it carefully in the damp earth. "So she knows we understand," she explained, watering the seed with water from a bottle they had brought from the house. The two went back inside the house and began making desperate calls. First they tried Claire's cell phone, but it kept going to voicemail. Then they called the hospital where she worked, but the receptionist informed them she had requested medical leave 3 months ago. "Medical leave for how long?" asked Walter, feeling his heart race. "I can't give that information over the phone, sir. You would have to speak directly with Human Resources." He hung up and immediately called the hospital's Human Resources department. After much insistence and identifying himself as Claire's father, he managed to speak with a more understanding employee. "Mr. Harrison, your daughter is indeed on medical leave. She left a contact address, but expressly asked us not to disclose it to anyone, not even to family. Please, it's urgent. We are her parents and we just found out she's sick. We just want to help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Walter could hear the employee breathing, clearly torn between following the rules and helping a family in despair. "I can't give the address, but I can try to contact her and ask her to call you. It's the most I can do." Walter accepted the offer, but knew it could take days or even weeks for Claire to return the call if she returned it at all. He needed a more direct approach. "Dorothy, I'm going to the city to speak personally with her colleagues at the hospital. Someone must know where she is," his wife agreed. "I'll stay here and keep looking for clues. Maybe there are more things buried around the yard." Walter took the keys to the old car they had used to come from the capital and headed towards the nearest city where the hospital was located. It was a trip of almost an hour, but he drove as if every minute were crucial. At the hospital, he went from department to department, speaking with nurses, doctors, and administrative staff. Most knew Claire and spoke of her with great affection, describing her as a dedicated professional and a very special person. "She's one of the best nurses who ever worked here," said an older colleague. "She always worried more about the patients than about herself." "Do you know why she requested leave?" insisted Walter. The nurse hesitated before answering. "I can't give medical details, but I can say she had been facing some health problems for a while. We were very worried when she decided to move." "To move? Where to?" "She mentioned something about a small town in the countryside. I think she wanted to be in a quieter place during her treatment." Walter felt a flicker of hope. If Claire had moved to a small town in the countryside, it would be easier to find her. Small towns were communities where everyone knew each other. "Did she say which town?" "I don't remember exactly, but I think it was near where you used to live. She talked a lot about the family farm." This information changed everything. If Claire had moved near the farm region, she could be very close to them. Maybe that was even why she had managed to keep the circle of grass so well tended. Walter thanked him for the information and ran back to the car. On the drive back to the farm, he stopped in every small town in the area, going into pharmacies, health clinics, and grocery stores to ask if anyone knew Claire Harrison. In the 5th town he visited, a pharmacist recognized the name immediately. "Oh, Nurse Claire, Of course I know her. She's a very special person. She comes here every week to buy her medications. Walter's heart raced. Does she live here in town? Yes, she does. She rented a little house on Flower Street, very close to the central square, house number 42. Walter thanked her profusely and followed the directions to Flower Street. It was a quiet street with simple but well-kept houses. Number 42 was a small house painted light blue with a tiny garden in front. He parked the car in front of the house and watched for a few minutes. There were signs someone lived there, clothes on the line, well-tended plants in the windows, a rocking chair on the small porch. But when he knocked on the door, no one answered. He tried several times until a neighbor appeared at the window of the house next door. "If you're looking for Claire, she's not here," shouted the neighbor. "She went to the big city today for her treatment. Do you know what time she'll be back?" "I don't know. Sometimes she stays admitted for a few days. It depends on how she's feeling." Walter thanked her and went back to the car, frustrated but at the same time relieved. At least now he knew where Claire lived. He could come back the next day, or leave a note explaining he was looking for her. He decided to return to the farm to tell Dorothy everything and plan the next steps. The sun was already setting when he arrived, and he found his wife in the backyard, carefully watering the circle of grass. "Did you find out anything?" she asked anxiously. Walter told her all about his journey through the region and about the house on Flower Street. Dorothy listened in silence, but he could see the relief in her eyes upon learning they had finally located their daughter. "She's getting treatment," said Dorothy, more as a statement than a question. "That's why the phone was out of service. She must be very weak." The two were silent for a few moments, absorbing the reality of the situation. Their youngest daughter was facing a battle against a serious illness alone, while they lived their lives in the city with no idea of her suffering. "Walter, look what I found while you were away," said Dorothy, showing a small wooden box she had dug up near the house. Inside the box were old family photographs, all carefully protected in plastic. They were photos from the time when they still lived on the farm, when the children were small and the family was united. "She kept the photos here," murmured Walter, picking up a photo where he appeared teaching Claire how to plant sunflower seeds. "Like it was a treasure." Dorothy pointed to a folded letter at the bottom of the box. "There's a letter, too. It's addressed to us." With trembling hands, Walter unfolded the letter. The handwriting was definitely Claire's, but it seemed weaker than usual, as if written with difficulty. "Dear Mom and Dad," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means you finally returned to the farm. I always knew you'd come back one day, because this land is in your hearts as much as it is in mine." Walter had to stop reading for a moment, feeling emotion overwhelm him. Dorothy held his hand, encouraging him to continue. "I know it must be strange to find this circle of green grass in the middle of the drought. It was my gift to you, my way of showing that our family's love can bloom even in the toughest conditions. Every seed I planted was planted with the hope that you would come home." Tears began to stream down Walter's face, but he kept reading. "I don't know if I'll be here when you arrive. I'm facing some health problems, but I don't want you to worry about me. The most important thing is for you to know that I never stopped believing in our family. This green circle is proof that love can keep anything alive, even from a distance." The letter continued for 2 more pages, full of childhood memories on the farm and expressions of love and forgiveness for the years of separation. Each word was like a dagger to Walter's heart, but at the same time it was a balm for the guilt he carried. "P.S. If someday I can no longer come to care for the circle, please don't let it die. It's the symbol of our family's love, and as long as it's alive, our family will be too." When he finished reading, Walter was crying openly. Dorothy was also crying, but there was a steely determination in her eyes. "We'll go get her tomorrow," she said, "and we'll bring our daughter home." Walter agreed, wiping away his tears. But before they went into the house, he knelt again in the circle of grass and touched the damp earth. "Thank you, Claire," he whispered. Dad understood the message. That night they slept little, anxious for the reunion that would happen the next day. Walter kept thinking about everything he would say to his daughter, about how he would ask for forgiveness for the years of neglect. Early in the morning they left for the city where Claire lived. This time Dorothy came along, carrying a basket with fruit and homemade cookies she had prepared in the early hours. When they arrived at Flower Street, they saw a light on at number 42. Walter parked the car, and the two walked nervously to the door. Dorothy knocked softly. They heard slow footsteps approaching, and then the door opened, revealing a woman they barely recognized. Claire had lost a lot of weight, and her hair, once long and brown, was now short with streaks of grey. She wore a colourful scarf on her head, and her cheeks were more sunken than usual. But her eyes were the same, sweet and full of a special light that had always characterized the youngest daughter. "Dad, Mom?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Claire, my daughter," said Walter, opening his arms. She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to approach. There was hurt in her eyes, but also a cautious hope. "How did you find me?" "We found the circle," said Dorothy, approaching slowly. "And the letters, and the seeds. We understood everything, my daughter." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You really went back to the farm?" "We went back," Walter confirmed. "And we're not leaving there anymore. Never again." Claire finally moved, stepping out of the doorway and throwing herself into her father's arms. Walter held her tightly, feeling how fragile she was, but also strong, like the grass she had cultivated in the midst of adversity. "Why didn't you tell us about the illness?" asked Dorothy, stroking her daughter's hair. "I didn't want to be a burden," replied Claire, sobbing softly. "You had your lives in the city, your commitments. I could handle this alone." "You were never a burden, Claire, never," said Walter, feeling his voice catch. "We were the bad parents, absent parents." Claire pulled back a little to look at her father's face. "Don't talk like that. You were always good parents. You were just busy building a better life for the family." Their daughter's generosity only increased Walter's guilt. Even sick, even abandoned, she was still trying to protect them from their own feelings of guilt. "How are you? Is the treatment working?" asked Dorothy, examining her daughter's pale face. Claire smiled, but it was a tired smile. "I'm better. The doctor said I responded well to the chemotherapy. I still have a few sessions left, but the prognosis is good." "You will do those sessions living with us at the farm," said Walter firmly. "It's not a suggestion, it's an order." Claire laughed for the first time since they had arrived, and in that sound, Walter recognized the cheerful daughter he remembered from childhood. "An order, is it?" she teased. "I don't know if I can disobey an order from my accountant father." "You certainly cannot," teased Dorothy, "and I will take care of you personally. I'll prepare all your favorite foods and I'll make sure you get plenty of rest." Claire looked from her father to her mother, and Walter could see she was wrestling between hope and the fear of being disappointed again. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated." "Claire Harrison," interrupted Walter, using the authoritative tone he used when she was a child and up to some mischief. "Stop this nonsense and go pack your bags. You're coming home today." She laughed again, louder this time. "Yes, sir." In the next few minutes they helped Claire gather her belongings. There wasn't much. Some clothes, books, medication, and a small collection of plants she grew on the kitchen windowsill. "The plants are coming too," said Dorothy, carefully carrying the small pots. "Everything that's important to you is important to us." During the drive back to the farm, Claire told them about the months she had spent caring for the circle of grass. She explained how she had researched the best types of seed, how she had calculated the exact amount of water needed, how she had created a care schedule she could maintain even on the days she felt weakest. "There were days when I could barely walk out there," she admitted, "but I couldn't let the circle die. It was my way of keeping you close to me." Walter drove in silence, absorbing every word from his daughter. Every detail she told revealed the impressive level of dedication and love she had invested in that project. "And on the days you couldn't go?" asked Dorothy. Claire smiled mysteriously. "That's when I had a special helper." "Helper?" "Mr. Joe from the little store. He lives near the farm and was always very kind to me. When I explained what I was doing, he offered to help on the days I couldn't go." Walter knew Mr. Joe, an older man who lived alone in a simple house a few miles from the farm. He was a quiet man who rarely talked to the neighbors, but apparently had developed a special friendship with Claire. "Did he know you were sick?" "He knew. He was the one who convinced me to seek medical treatment when I was trying to ignore the symptoms. He said I couldn't die before seeing you all come back home. The word die made Walter grip the steering wheel tighter. The thought that he could have lost Claire without ever having the chance to redeem himself as a father was almost unbearable. You will never go through anything alone again, he promised. Never again. When they arrived at the farm, the sun was beginning to set, creating a golden light that made the circle of grass seem even more magical. Claire got out of the car slowly and walked to the center of the circle, kneeling on the grass she had cared for with so much love. "Hello, little garden," she whispered, touching the grass tenderly. "Mom and Dad are home." Walter and Dorothy stood watching their daughter, too moved to speak. In that moment they completely understood what that circle meant. It wasn't just grass. It was hope made tangible. It was love made visible. It was proof that some bonds are too strong to be broken by distance or time. "Claire," said Walter, approaching his daughter, "I need to ask for forgiveness." She looked up at him. "Why, Dad?" "For being an absent father, for prioritizing work over family, for not noticing that you were suffering." Claire stood up and took her father's hands. "Dad, look around you. You're here now, that's what matters." "But the years we lost—" "They weren't lost," she interrupted. "They were invested. You worked hard to make sure the family had security. Now we have time to recover what was put on the back burner." His daughter's wisdom left Walter speechless. Even after all she had been through, she could still see the positive side of the situation. "And now?" asked Dorothy. "What do we do with this magical place?" Claire smiled and turned to look at the property around them. "Now we turn the entire farm into a place like this. We'll plant, we'll cultivate, we'll make this land a symbol of renewal." "Even during your treatment?" Walter worried. "Especially during my treatment," she replied with determination. "The doctor said outdoor activities and contact with nature can help a lot with recovery." In the following days, the three of them worked together to clean and organize the farm. Claire, despite her physical fragility, proved to be an inexhaustible source of ideas and energy. She had researched extensively about sustainable farming techniques and drought-resistant plants. "We can create a drip irrigation system using plastic bottles," she explained, showing drawings she had made during chemotherapy sessions. "It's cheap and efficient." Walter was impressed with his daughter's technical knowledge. During all those months planning the grass circle, she had become an expert in sustainable agriculture. "Where did you learn all this?" "The internet, library books, conversations with other patients who were also farmers," she explained. "I had a lot of free time between one session and another." Dorothy shook her head, amazed. "You turned suffering into learning." "And you're going to help me turn that learning into reality," said Claire, hugging her parents. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The first week together was one of mutual adaptation. Walter had to learn to slow down after years of an intense urban routine. Dorothy rediscovered domestic skills she had abandoned when they moved to the city, and Claire allowed herself to be cared for after months of only taking care of herself. "Dad, you don't need to check my medication every 2 hours." Claire laughed one morning when Walter appeared for the 4th time, asking if she had taken her pills. "Sorry," he said, a little awkwardly. "I'm still learning how to be a present father." "You were always present in my heart," she replied. "Now you're just being physically present too." These frank conversations became part of the family's daily routine. They spoke about the lost years, about unspoken expectations, about feelings that had been kept locked away for a long time. "I always thought you were ashamed of me," admitted Claire one afternoon, as the three of them planted tomato seedlings next to the original circle. "Ashamed? Why?" asked Dorothy, genuinely surprised. "Because I chose to be a nurse instead of pursuing a university career like my siblings. Because I preferred to stay in the countryside instead of moving to a big city." Walter stopped digging and looked at his daughter. "Claire, we were never ashamed of you. If anything, we've always been proud of your choice to care for people." "Then why did you stop visiting? Why did the calls become so infrequent?" It was a question Walter knew would come one day, but still, he wasn't prepared to answer. How to explain that he had become addicted to work, that he had confused providing financially with caring emotionally? "Because I'm an idiot," he finally said with brutal honesty. "Because I thought working more hours to earn more money was the best way to show love for the family. Because I confused material security with emotional security." Claire stopped planting and stared at her father. "And now? Do you still think that?" "Now I know all the money in the world isn't worth one of your hugs," he replied, moved. "That having a full bank account means nothing if the house is empty of love." It was the first of many deep conversations the family would have in the following months. They talked about regrets, about abandoned dreams, about the importance of being present in each other's lives. During this period, Claire continued her treatment, making weekly trips to the city. But now she didn't go alone. Walter always accompanied her, using the trip to get to know her doctors better and understand all the details of the treatment. "Your daughter is an exemplary patient," said the oncologist during one of the appointments. "She has a very positive attitude, which helps a lot in her recovery." "She's always been strong like that," replied Walter, pride in his voice. "But you know family support is crucial, right? Patients with a solid support network always recover better." It was exactly what Walter wanted to hear. Finally, he could contribute concretely to his daughter's well-being. At home, Dorothy dedicated herself to creating an environment of healing and tranquility. She researched foods that could help during chemotherapy and became an expert at cooking nutritious dishes that were still flavorful. "Mom, you've become a chef," praised Claire, savoring a pumpkin and ginger soup Dorothy had prepared, especially to combat the treatment's side effects. "I always knew how to cook," laughed Dorothy. "I'd just forgotten how nice it is to cook for someone who appreciates it." The farm slowly came back to life. The original circle of grass became the center of a larger revitalization project. They planted an organic garden, created an orchard with fruit trees resistant to the dry climate, and even built a small chicken coop. "You know what this place needs?" said Claire one morning, observing the result of weeks of joint work. "What?" asked her parents in unison. "An artesian well. That way we never have to worry about drought again." Walter did some mental calculations. An artesian well would be a significant investment, but he had saved quite a bit of money during his years in the city, and now he knew exactly what he wanted to use those savings for. "I'll call today to get a quote," he said. "Dad, it doesn't have to be now. It's very expensive." "Claire," Walter interrupted, "what do you think I worked so hard all those years for? To keep money in the bank? Or to secure my family's future?" She smiled, understanding it was no use arguing when her father had made up his mind like that. The artesian well was drilled 3 weeks later, and when crystal-clear water gushed from the new pump, the whole family celebrated as if they'd discovered treasure. "Now we're set," said Claire, wetting her hands in the cool water. "Now the farm is complete." But the real celebration came 2 weeks later, when Claire returned from a doctor's appointment with news that made everyone cry with joy. "The doctor said there are no more signs of the illness," she announced, still in disbelief. "I'm officially in complete remission." Walter lifted her off the ground in a hug that lasted several minutes. Dorothy cried so much she couldn't speak, and Claire, in the center of her parents' arms, finally allowed herself to believe everything would be all right. That night, they had an impromptu party in the farm's backyard. They invited Mr. Joe, who had been so important during Claire's difficult months. They called some neighbors who had become friends during the months back in the countryside. "A toast," said Walter, raising a glass of orange juice made from oranges from the orchard they had planted. "To Claire, who taught us that love can make anything flourish, even in the most adverse conditions." "And to the parents I always knew would come back home," replied Claire, raising her own glass. "And to the family that discovered it's never too late to reunite," added Dorothy. As they toasted under the stars of the Kentucky countryside, Walter looked around and saw they had created much more than a productive farm. They had created a true home, a place where each family member had space to be who they truly were. The original circle of grass was still there, carefully maintained as a reminder of the lesson they had learned. But now it was part of a larger garden, an oasis of hope and love that spread across the entire property. "Dad," said Claire, approaching him as the guests chatted animatedly, "thank you for coming back home." "Thank you for keeping the home alive while we were away," he replied, hugging his daughter. "And now? What's the next project for the Harrison family?" Walter smiled, looking at Dorothy as she organized the party table with the loving efficiency that always characterized her. "Now we'll live each day as if it were a gift," he said. "We'll take care of this land, take care of each other, and never forget what really matters again." Claire agreed with a smile. "And maybe, who knows, convince my siblings to come spend a vacation here. Do you think they would come?" "I'm sure. They're just waiting to see that you've really changed. When they realize the workaholic dad has turned into a passionate farmer, they'll want to meet this new version of the family." The idea of gathering the whole family at the farm filled Walter with eager anticipation. There was so much lost time to recover, so many conversations to have, so many hugs to give. "Then let's work to give them reasons to want to stay," he said, determined. In the months that followed, the farm truly became a magical place. The irrigation system worked perfectly, ensuring that not even a severe drought could threaten what they had built. The plants grew lush, the animals multiplied, and the house filled again with sounds of life and joy. Claire, fully recovered, became the soul of the project. She created a blog where she documented the experience of transforming an abandoned property into a sustainable oasis. The blog attracted the attention of other farmers in the region who came to visit to learn about the techniques they had developed. "I never thought I'd become a rural influencer," laughed Claire, showing her parents the enthusiastic comments from followers who were replicating her farming methods. "You've always been influential," said Dorothy. "You just didn't know you had a talent for teaching." The blog's success brought unexpected opportunities. A nearby agricultural university invited Claire to give lectures on sustainable farming for small properties. A farmers' cooperative offered technical support to expand the project. "Dad, I think we have an important decision to make," said Claire one evening after a meeting with representatives from the cooperative. "What decision?" "They want to turn our farm into a model property for sustainable agriculture. It would be a big investment, but also a chance to help dozens of other rural families." Walter considered the proposal carefully. It was an opportunity to use his business experience for something much bigger than personal profit. "What do you think? Is this what you want to do?" Claire looked out the window at the original circle of grass, which remained green and perfect in the center of the yard. "I want to do what that circle symbolizes. I want to keep people's hope alive, even under the most difficult conditions." "Then let's do it," Walter decided. "But with one condition. Our home remains our home. The project can grow around it, but our family is still the priority." "I completely agree," said Claire. "Actually, speaking of family, I have some news to share with you." Walter and Dorothy exchanged curious glances. From their daughter's expression, it was good news. "Edward and Margaret have confirmed they're spending Christmas here," she announced, referring to the other two children. "And Edward is bringing his girlfriend for you to meet." The news left both parents elated. It would be the first time in over 5 years that the entire family would be together for Christmas. "We'll prepare the best Christmas celebration this farm has ever seen," said Dorothy, already making mental plans. "And we'll show them how a family can flourish when everyone cares for each other," Walter added. Christmas 2024 was indeed special. Edward arrived with his girlfriend, a veterinarian who immediately fell in love with the farm and the animals they raised. Margaret brought her young son, who discovered for the first time the joy of running freely on a rural property. "Mom, Dad, you've completely changed," said Edward during the Christmas dinner. "You're more relaxed, more present." "Country life has that effect," Walter replied. "But what really changed us was rediscovering what it means to be a family." "And Claire?" asked Margaret. "How is she after everything she's been through?" Claire, who was serving a dessert made with fruit from their own farm, smiled at her sister. "I'm better than ever. The illness taught me to value each day, and you all taught me that family is the most precious thing we have." "Claire was our teacher," said Dorothy. "She showed us how to cultivate hope, even in the most difficult times." Edward stood up and walked to the window overlooking the yard, where the original circle of grass continued to shine under the starlight. "So the story about the magic circle is true?" "There's nothing magical about it," laughed Claire. "It's just love turned into action. Love cultivated with patience, watered with hope, and protected by the faith that things can get better." "Can I make a confession?" said Edward, returning to the table. "When you all moved to the city, I thought our family was over, that we were just people who shared the same last name but had nothing else in common." Walter felt his heart tighten. Apparently the distance had affected all the children, not just Claire. "And now?" he asked. Edward looked around the table, where 4 generations of the Harrison family shared food, stories, and laughter. "Now I know that family is like that circle of grass. It can go through the worst drought, but if there's real love, it always finds a way to survive and bloom again." Margaret agreed, wiping away a tear. "And sometimes it takes a special person to keep hope alive until everyone is ready to start growing together again." Everyone looked at Claire, who blushed with emotion. "I only did what any of you would do for me." "No," said Walter, standing up to hug his daughter. "You did something extraordinary. You turned suffering into love, distance into closeness, abandonment into hope." The celebration continued into the early hours, with childhood stories, plans for the future, and promises that they would never again let so much time pass without getting together. When the children left after the New Year, they took with them seedlings from the farm plants and the promise to return for the next holidays. "The house will be quiet without them," said Dorothy, waving until the last car disappeared down the dirt road. "But it won't be empty," replied Claire, hugging her mother, "because now we know that physical distance doesn't mean emotional distance." Walter agreed, looking at the project they had built together. The farm was now an example of sustainability and rural innovation. Claire's blog had thousands of followers. The cooperative was planning to replicate the model on other properties. But more important than all of that was what they had achieved as a family. They had learned to communicate, to be present in each other's lives, to value the small, everyday moments that truly make life worth living. "You know what I think is the most amazing thing about all this?" said Walter, observing the original circle of grass that remained perfect in the center of the yard. "What?" "That it all started with you watering a patch of dirt in the middle of nowhere, believing in a hope that no one else could see." Claire smiled, kneeling to touch the grass she had planted with so much love. "And you all proved my hope was right, that our family really could bloom again." "And it will keep blooming," promised Dorothy. "Forever." As the sun set over the prosperous farm they had created together, the 3 of them stood there contemplating the everyday miracle of family love. It wasn't really a miracle, of course. It was work, dedication, patience, and forgiveness. It was the daily choice to care for each other, even when it was hard. But for them, who had gone through years of estrangement and almost lost forever the chance to be a true family, it did indeed feel like a miracle. The miracle of discovering that it's never too late to start over. It's never impossible to fix what seems broken. And that love really can make anything grow, even in the midst of the driest drought. The green circle was still there, now surrounded by lush gardens and productive fields. But its meaning had expanded far beyond the grass Claire had planted. It was now the symbol of a family that had learned to cultivate hope, to water love with concrete actions, and to protect their bonds against any adversity. And every morning when Walter woke up and looked out the window to see that perfect circle shining under the Kentucky sun, he remembered the most important lesson a daughter can teach a father. That true success in life isn't measured in money earned or goals achieved, but in hearts cared for, presence offered, and love cultivated day after day, like a precious plant that needs constant attention to bloom. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Months after the family reunion at Christmas, life on the farm had settled into a perfect rhythm. Walter had discovered a natural talent for sustainable agriculture, applying the same discipline he used in accounting to monitor crops, calculate yields, and optimize resources. Dorothy had proven to be an excellent manager of the agritourism project they had developed. Visitors came from various cities to learn about cultivation techniques in arid regions, and always left impressed not only with the plants, but with the family story behind the project. "You are an inspiration to many families who have lost their connection," said one visitor, a woman of about 60 who had brought her adult daughter to see the farm. "Our family also went through a difficult period of estrangement." Claire, who now led the guided tours with the ease of someone born to teach, smiled with understanding. "The important thing is to realize it's never too late to start again. Sometimes we just need a symbol, something concrete that represents our hope." "Like that circle of grass?" "Exactly. For our family, it was that circle. For you, it could be anything else. What matters is not giving up on love." These conversations repeated weekly with different visitors who came seeking technical inspiration, but ended up finding emotional inspiration as well. Walter realized they had created something much bigger than a model farm. They had created a living example that relationships can be restored. One May morning, Claire received a call that would once again change the family's course. It was from a producer of a television program about inspiring stories. "Claire, we heard about your story through your blog and would like to do a feature on the farm. Would that be possible?" She hesitated. The family had found precious peace in the simple country life, and exposing that intimacy on television could bring complications. "Can I talk to my parents and get back to you with an answer?" "Of course, but I can say it would be an opportunity to inspire thousands of other families going through similar difficulties." When Claire told her parents about the invitation, their reactions were mixed. "I'm not sure I want our private life exposed like that," said Dorothy, worried. "But it could be a chance to help other people," Walter pondered. "How many families aren't going through the same thing we did? And what if they distort our story? If they make it seem simpler than it really was?" Claire understood her mother's concerns. There were very intimate and painful aspects of their journey that wouldn't be easy to share publicly. "What if we ask to see the script beforehand?" she suggested, "and make it clear we have veto power over anything that doesn't correctly represent our experience?" After several conversations and much reflection, the family decided to accept the invitation, but with strict conditions on how the story would be told. The reporting crew arrived on a sunny June morning. The director was a middle-aged man who immediately showed interest not only in the emotional story, but also in the technical aspects of the agricultural project. "It's impressive how you managed to transform an abandoned property into a sustainability reference," he said, filming the lush gardens. "The secret isn't just in the technique," Walter explained. "It's in the motivation. When you cultivate with love, the plants feel the difference." For 3 days, the team documented the family's routine, recorded in-depth interviews about the period of separation and reconciliation, and captured the daily work on the farm. The most emotional moment of the filming was when they asked Walter to recount, at the exact spot where he had discovered the circle, how he felt upon realizing what Claire had done. "I knelt right here," he said, repeating the gesture he had made months before. "And when I realized my daughter had spent her own money and her own health to keep alive the hope that we would return, I cried like I hadn't since I was a boy." The camera captured the tears that returned to Walter's eyes as he relived that moment. In the background, the original circle remained perfect, now surrounded by the gardens that had grown around it. "And what would you say to other parents who might be living a similar situation?" Walter thought carefully before answering. "I would say it's never too late to put family first. That money in the bank is worthless if we have no one to share life with, and that our children deserve our presence, not just our provision." The interview with Claire was equally touching. She spoke about how she had transformed the suffering of illness into strength to keep family love alive. "I could have been angry for feeling abandoned," she said, sitting in the center of the circle she had created. "But I chose to believe my parents loved me even from a distance, and that choice made all the difference. What do you think other people can learn from your story? That love sometimes needs to be shown through concrete actions. It's not enough to feel love. You need to express that love in a way people can see and feel." The report aired 2 weeks later, on a Sunday night. The whole family gathered in the living room to watch, nervous about how their story would be presented. They were surprised and moved by the result. The program had captured the essence of their journey with sensitivity and authenticity, without unnecessary dramatizations or sentimental distortions. They managed to show that our story is real, said Dorothy, relieved. That family isn't perfect, but it can be repaired with effort and love. In the following days, the farm received hundreds of calls and messages from people who identified with the story. Families from across the country wanted to visit them, others wanted advice on how to implement similar projects, and many just wanted to share their own stories of family reconciliation. "We had no idea so many people were going through similar problems," commented Claire, reading some of the most touching messages. One of the letters that moved them the most came from a businessman from New York who had grown distant from his children due to excessive work. He wrote that after watching the report, he had sold part of his business and moved to the countryside to try to rebuild the family relationship. "You made me realize I was repeating the same mistakes my father made with me," he wrote. "Thank you for giving me the courage to change while there's still time." These stories confirmed for the Harrison family that they had made the right decision in sharing their experience publicly. With increased visibility came new opportunities. A publisher proposed that Claire write a book about the family's experience. A university offered a partnership for research on sustainable agriculture. A chain of farm hotels wanted to include them in a rural tourism itinerary. "We have to be careful not to lose focus," Walter warned in a family meeting to decide which opportunities to accept. "Our priority remains our family and our life here on the farm." "I agree," said Claire, "but I think we can accept proposals that allow us to help other families without compromising our lifestyle." They decided to accept the book proposal, but insisted it would be written right there on the farm, with no need for constant travel. They also accepted the partnership with the university, which would send students for practical internships on the property. The first group of interns arrived in September. They were young people enthusiastic about sustainable agriculture, but they ended up learning much more about family relationships than about planting techniques. "You have a very special family dynamic," observed Rachel, a 22-year-old agronomy student. "My parents are also from the countryside, but they never talk about feelings like you do." "We didn't either before," admitted Dorothy. "We had to learn after almost losing each other." "And how did you learn?" "By practicing every day," answered Claire. "Just like you learn to care for plants, with patience, dedication, and a lot of love." The interns stayed for 3 months, and when they left, they took with them not only technical knowledge, but also a new perspective on the importance of family relationships. "You changed my way of thinking about success," said Daniel, a young man who wanted to pursue a corporate career. "Now I know I want a profession that allows me to be present in my family's life." Comments like this became frequent. The Harrison family farm was transforming into an informal school of family values, disguised as a sustainable agriculture center. The autumn of 2025 brought a new joy to the family. Edward announced his engagement to the veterinarian he had met the previous Christmas. "We want to have the wedding party here on the farm," he said during a call. "This place represents for us what a family can build when dedicated with love." The news filled everyone with emotion. It would be the first wedding held on the property, and they wanted it to be perfect. The preparations lasted months. Dorothy coordinated the culinary aspects, insisting that all the food be produced on the farm itself. Walter took care of the infrastructure, building a small altar in the garden and organizing the space for the guests. Claire was responsible for the floral decorations, using exclusively plants and flowers grown right there. The original circle of grass naturally became the focal point of the ceremony. "It's perfect," said the bride during a visit to see the preparations. "It's as if the land itself is blessing our marriage." The wedding took place on a golden afternoon in April 2026. About 80 people gathered in the farm gardens to celebrate not only the union of Edward and his wife, but also the complete restoration of the Harrison family. "When I was a child," said Edward in his thank you speech, "this place represented safety and unconditional love to me. Then, for a few years, it represented longing and separation. Today it represents renewal and hope. There could be no better place to start my own family." Walter, wearing his best suit but still with a bit of dirt under his nails from working so much in the garden, was deeply moved by his son's words. Margaret, who had traveled especially for the wedding, took the occasion to make an announcement of her own. You know I've always lived in the city and swore I'd never adapt to rural life, she said. But after seeing how you've built something so special here, I decided to try. I'm moving to a nearby town and want to participate more actively in family life. The news was met with hugs and tears of joy. The family that had been spread across different cities was finally reuniting geographically too. Our Sunday table is going to need to be bigger, joked Dorothy, already picturing family lunches with grandchildren running around the backyard. During the party, many guests commented on the special atmosphere of the farm. There was something palpable in the air, a feeling of peace and harmony that few places can convey. You've truly managed to create a little piece of paradise here, said the priest who celebrated the ceremony. It's not just the beauty of the property, it's the energy of love you can feel in every corner. It was built with many tears, but also with much love, replied Claire, looking toward the circle where it had all begun. When the party ended and the last guests departed, the family was left alone contemplating the gardens illuminated by the full moon. Remember when I said I wanted to make this farm a symbol of renewal? Asked Claire. I remember, replied Walter, and we achieved much more than that. Achieved what? We made this farm a symbol that love always finds a way to bloom, no matter how arid the ground may seem. Dorothy approached the original circle and knelt to touch the grass that remained perfect after all those months. You know what I find most amazing? She said. This circle never needed special care after you all came back. It's as if it knew it had fulfilled its mission. It was true. Since the family had reunited, the circle stayed green and lush, with only the necessary basic care. It was as if it had a life of its own, nourished by the love that had finally found its way to express itself. Maybe it's because now the whole farm is a circle of love, Claire philosophized. That tiny one was just the beginning. That night, the three of them stayed up late, talking about the future. They had achieved much more than any of them had imagined when they returned from the city a year and a half before. What do you think life still has in store for us? Asked Walter. Much joy, some difficulties, and the certainty that we'll face everything together, replied Dorothy. And the opportunity to keep helping other families find their own way back to love, Claire added. In the following months, these predictions proved correct. The farm continued to grow and prosper, attracting visitors from all over the country. Claire's book was published and became a bestseller, helping thousands of families reflect on their own dynamics. Edward and his wife announced they were expecting their first child, who would be Walter and Dorothy's first grandchild. Margaret did move to the region and opened a small consulting office, visiting her parents at least 3 times a week. I never imagined it was possible to be this happy, said Walter one December morning, watching Dorothy teach her daughter-in-law to cook with vegetables from the garden, while Claire and Margaret planned the expansion of the farm's educational project. He was sitting on the bench they had placed beside the original circle, a spot that had become his favorite place for morning reflection. Daddy, can I sit with you? Asked Claire, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Always, my daughter, always. They sat in silence for a few minutes, contemplating the property that had transformed into a true oasis of life and love. Claire, can I ask a question I never had the courage to ask? Of course. In the hardest moments of your illness, when you felt most alone, did you ever regret keeping that circle? Did you ever think you were wasting your time waiting for us? Claire took a sip of coffee before answering, carefully considering her words. You know what I thought when I was at my weakest, after the toughest chemotherapy sessions. What? I thought that, even if you never came back, even if I didn't survive the illness, that circle would be my way of leaving proof in the world that I had loved you with all the strength I had. Walter felt his eyes fill with tears. And now, how do you feel now? Now I know that love really can move mountains, or at least it can make 2 people leave the big city and come back to care for a little piece of land in the middle of the backcountry, she laughed, hugging her father. You saved our family, Claire. No, Dad, we saved our family. Together. You with your dedication to learning how to be present, Mum with her care in creating a true home, and me with my stubbornness in not giving up hope. And now? Now we keep growing. Like that circle, which was small but kept spreading until it took over the whole property, Walter agreed, watching the grandchildren playing in the yard, Margaret's son, and now also Edward's baby, who was crawling on the green grass. 3 generations running on this grass you planted, he observed, and when they grow up they'll tell their children the story of the circle that survived the drought, said Claire. They'll learn that family is something you cultivate every day with patience and love. Walter stood up and extended his hand to help his daughter up as well. Let's get to work then. We have another day to cultivate our family. Claire accepted her father's hand and stood up, but before they walked toward the house, she turned once more to the original circle. Thank you, she whispered to the grass she had planted with so much hope. And Walter had the impression that the grass shone a little greener under the morning sun, as if it were replying, "Thank you for proving that hope is always worth it." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of family renewal and where you're watching from. Do you believe love can really make anything flourish, even in the most difficult conditions? Leave your comment with sincere words about your own family experience. We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. And don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.